As long as Connor's ready, we're ready. Connor will lead us in the pledge. All right.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Welcome, everyone. We have a fairly full agenda. I feel like I should take a moment of silence for the chapter house, but I don't have time for that, so we'll just move on. Hours of my misspent youth, but that's okay. And it was really a bad fire. I mean, that was not good. Modifications to the agenda.
Yeah, I have one. If we could add, it's going to be school district business, letter F. A resolution, board resolution to sustain a student disciplinary determination.
Security. All right. Anything else, Brad?
That's the only change I'm aware of.
Very good. So we'll move on, and we will hear from the public at this time. And Robin. There you go. Hey, Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Salisbury. This is not my thing, so forgive me if I mumble or stumble in my words. My daughter's here with me tonight. She's a kindergarten at BJM. This is my 6th year being an aide for the school district. I've worked in elementary and middle school. I feel like I'm one of the first lines of defense for our students. I have to get to know them inside and out. So I feel like I deal with the emotional, physical, and the academic well-being of each student I work with. And I say each because I don't just work with students that are assigned to me. I work with students outside of the classroom that just need someone they can trust and look up to. So, like I said, this is my 6th year. I only bring home $493 bi-weekly. This is not enough to support myself or my family. Starting off for a 2-bedroom apartment, it's like $850 without utilities. So I have to pay for all of these stuff, childcare, food, clothes, and childcare is like $500 a month. So I know our contract is up and we're trying to negotiate. So like I have to get assistance through, and I feel like working as hard as I do, it's not a 9 to 3 job for me. I go beyond what I'm supposed to care about what I do. And so for me to get DSS help to pay for food and to clothe my daughter, it's right. And I really hope you guys would consider raising us so we can provide for our families. And I would invite you all to come see what we do every day, and so you would see our worth and how much we mean to these kids and change their lives every single day. And thank you. I have to leave to get my daughter to bed. But thank you for hearing me. You guys have a good night. Bye.
Thanks, Robin. And Roy Dexheimer.
My heart is filled with overflowing of memories of hours spent in this room. It's either that or angina. A moment of credibility. I know the difficulty of establishing a budget. After 40 years as a superintendent, and 2 as a college vice president, and 3 on this board, I've gone through a lot of things, and I understand the difficult decisions you make. This is the first time since I stopped being a superintendent I've come to advocate for something, and the something is Project 4. There are colleagues here who will speak more to the facts of the matter. I would say if you've not been to a Project 4 performance, you've missed something. To see 2 little lads who every time they had a line, it looked like those little dolls when you pull the string, their arms fly up in the air. They did that. Or a youngster who was portraying Hendrik Hudson and apparently thought it would have more adult air to it if he wore his father's trousers, which kept falling off. But every child is part of this. Every child is part of creating the song that they sing and the musicians who work with them. They're all sizes and shapes, usually the girl's much taller, but reasonably so. They're all religions and colors and nationalities, and they're together. What you see when you hear them and watch them is joy and enlightenment and engagement. And I think that's what education is all about. I hope that this program survives your scrutiny. It's important. It reaches a lot of kids at a reasonable cost, and I know the other things you're trying to deal with. And I would say nothing else.
Thank you, Roy. And Melanie Stein.
Hi,
Nope, there you go.
is this okay over here?
If you could stand up, that would be great.
I'd like to talk about what happens when a red flag is raised because a particular demographic grouping in a school has done poorly in the spring standardized assessments. A few years ago, this red flag was called SINI, School in Need of Improvement, and now it's called LAP, which stands for Local Assistance Plan. This is part of the accountability system New York State has negotiated with the federal government as an alternative to the standard No Child Left Behind protocol. 2 of our Ithaca schools are in LAP status this year. My impression is that this is supposed to function as a gentle wake-up call, that some targeted constructive improvements are needed. When a school is in LAP status, the state leaves it to the school to develop its own local assistance plan. Once a school is in LAP status and has developed its local assistance plan through discussions with staff and parents, it's required to publish the plan and submit a link to the State Accountability Office by late November. Last year, the ICSD local assistance plans were published in good time. This year, they haven't been. Dr. Brown and Mr. Ainsley twice in early February and again in late February to ask for a copy of the plans. Dr. Brown responded to my second request as follows. Neither school has a completed LAP plan for this school year. I'd therefore like to request that the board put this on the agenda for the next board meeting and invite administration to provide a progress report. Following up on inadequate yearly progress seems to me to be easy to pick, low-hanging fruit, one of the first things a district can do to help every child succeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie. And Cats? Cats? No? Looks like cats to me.
Does.
that was
Cats
nice.
Pierce?
Katie Pierce.
Katie Pierce. So.
Okay, there you go. Hey, there you go.
So I'm Katie Pierce. I have 4 kids who've gone through this wonderful school district. They're old now. They have real lives, which is kind of amazing to me. I also was trained in the 1970s as a special ed teacher. I've been in this room many times for meetings, and mostly for meetings. I've been thinking in the last day, knowing that this was coming up, of what are the values? What did we experience? My kids had a lot to do with the whole climate of the district, and that we all knew each other, and we all had high standards of what we wanted for our kids, and we all pitched in. Now I'm on the hangar board, and I've had the joy of watching the Hangar Theater in action, and I'm very proud. And there are a couple of different stories. When I was first on the board, I was driving to a meeting on a Monday night, and there was an NPR presentation about theater and how it affected low-achieving students. It was in Chicago or something. And I'm getting more and more excited. I'm thinking, that's what we do. My other story is that there's we used to be June worth of BOCES kids. I went to, and this one night, presentation, it was in that adult learning center. This father came up to me and he said, I can't believe what I've just experienced. My kid has never done anything good, and he just did this. Oh my gosh. You know, the whole paradigm of who his child was changed that night. This is really, really important. A big part of what my training was had to do with family involvement, because we know that as families are involved, kids achieve more. This program brings families into schools. So there's parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, all kinds of people who don't usually come into schools come in to see the kids perform. I used to do parent programs, and one time, this is my very good story, but I'll tell it anyway. The kids were going to perform, and we had the idea that maybe we could tack on a little bit, without telling the parents, a little bit of parent education. Announced for them. People were coming. The reason we were doing that is we knew that the parents would come into the school because the kids were performing. That's one of today. These days you can just go on your iPad and find out New York State standards and think about these things. The program and the skills and the things that the kids are doing really connect to the New York State standards without losing any time, because it's meaningful education. It's the kind of education that my kids experienced. So let's see what else I wanted to tell you. The main thing is just the value of this school district and of raising a family in this town has to do with the quality of education. And I'm asking you to really think of the children, and before you make cuts, make sure that you're not losing something that's just going to be so hard to put back in. If it's only a small amount of money and it's doing a lot and affecting the culture of the schools. Every school has this program. It's happening on the 4th grade. I think probably brings a lot of conversation to all the other teachers about the way you teach and the meaningfulness and having the parents come in. So I think there's a huge benefit of having this program, and my interest in the school district for 40 years and Hangar Theater for almost 15 or 20 years have come together tonight, so I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you, and I hope that you keep the program.
Thanks, Kate. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak that did not have the opportunity to sign up? If not, we'll move on. And student reps and LACS. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
Let me just pull it up on my phone. So this week has been, the past 2 weeks have been very successful for ACS in building community and doing different activities. So the first exciting thing that has happened is that a student organized a disability simulation. This week and next week, 5 students from high school and 5 students from middle school next week, because of testing this week, will simulate having a disability. And there are 2 available. One is the blindness simulation, where you are blindfolded and use a cane. The other one is physical disability simulation, where they're using a wheelchair. And the idea is to raise awareness and to bring to light what it's like to be disabled and what kind of struggles you face on a daily basis with accessibility, etc. Secondly, the mock trial team, the unofficial official sport of LACS, won against IHS for the first time in 5 years, and are now the Tompkins County champions and will be heading to regionals. Congratulations on a great game or trial, IHS. And lastly, the LACS Shakespeare program, which was student started and run, is presenting Much Ado About Nothing this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday at 7, Saturday at 3 o'clock and 7 o'clock, and Sunday at 2 o'clock. So I hope to see you all there.
Great, thank you. And Ithaca High, how in the world could you lose to LACS? But, I mean, the sheer volume, sheer popular, but go ahead, guys.
Sure, so last April 11th at around 1, students got together at Bliss Gym to have a handball tournament, which is all student run, and students had the snacks and refreshments. With about teams of 5 to 9, with each entrant paying about $5. Kids kind of decked it out to see who would win. A prize of about $75, with all the proceeds going to the senior and junior class to do whatever they want with the proms coming up. So, and then on April 18th at 1 p.m. there's going to be a basketball with entrants paying about $5 with a chance to win $75, with the proceeds going to the National Society of Black Engineers. And then a little while back, after fixing up a few bits with the Scarlet Scorpion, Code Red Robotics was able to reach the quarterfinals at the Buckeye Regional Championship with First Robotics out of about 55 teams. The competition was in Cleveland State University in Ohio, where we met old friends and rivals in a large gymnasium.
Well, we've come back from spring break, and I think students and staff enjoyed their about a week off. Although, as a side note, I'm sure we would have appreciated the weather we're having now. But I think nonetheless it was a good break, and we're all happy to be back and engaged in learning. Now, this Thursday through Sunday, the Ithaca Multi-UN Club will compete in the annual Cornell Multi-United Nations Conference. This is the largest conference we attend, drawing over 2,000 competitors from schools all across the world and all across the United States. So I'm sure we wish our team good luck in their conference. Additionally, although it was the first time in 5 years that LACS has beaten out the IHS mock trial team, we'd like to officially say well done, and I guess we'll have to see how it goes next year.
We're in the midst of spring sports season. As you can see, we have like a tennis meet and a track meet outside today. There's JV and varsity baseball, lacrosse, tennis, and track. And all these teams are training hard, and it's inevitable that they're going to have a great season. And this Friday, a large number of students from the music department at IHS are going to be going to New York City for a weekend full of incredible music performances. They're going to be going to the Lincoln Center for a jazz tribute, I believe, and they're attending a Metropolitan Opera production of Aida and the Broadway showing of Les Miserables. And the students are very excited for this trip that's supposed to be an unforgettable experience.
Picture it, a party in Paris. Our students went to France with IHS, and oh, how grand it was. One could even say, magnifique. They laughed at the Louvre, had a terrific time at the Tower, celebrated at the Arc de Triomphe. There was a lot of awareness with regards to France's rich history, the French Revolution, Napoleon. It's all relevant. There was also a lot of art. Oh, how rich, rewarding, and breathtaking French art is. Museums, museums, museums. However, the most important part, students practiced what they had learned in French class for 2, 3, or 4 years. Able to have a lot of conversations with the native speakers in France. It has been said to learn another language is to gain another soul, and the students did just that. On April 22nd, Mr. Don Lisi, the technology director, will be presenting to our student council, who will then present to their social studies classes. So in theory, every student in the school will know about the Chromebooks. There will be a Chromebook question and answer session. It's vital that students are aware of what's going on with that transition. There have been a lot of efforts to aware teachers, but we have to bond the partnership together as it'll change our academic culture, and it's vital that those questions be answered. So they will, next Wednesday. And in congruence with April being Poetry Month, as I did last year, I will read a poem again. This one entitled A Thorny Rose. Our life is like a thorny rose, not perfect, but always beautiful. The thorns represent the hardships in our lives. The delicate red petals represent the fun and beautiful things in our lives. As a young rose, the petals hugging around the seed are the family and friends who protect, love, and care for us. Thanks.
Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Ithaca High. Board responses, and no comments about what was the roast between two thorns. What was that? Go ahead, Sean.
I wish Ms. Salisbury was here not to address the substantive parts of her comments, given the fact that we are in negotiation. But I should say, I actually had Robin as a middle schooler and a high schooler, and it brought me great joy and pride to see her be so articulate and share her story. So there's an example of what an ICSD education does as well. So that was fantastic to see. So that's my only response.
Eldred, go ahead.
I just want to add one other thing. Robin had approached me a little earlier to talk about her feelings about what she said tonight. And she did miss one opportunity to say something that she had mentioned to me. So I'll say it because it actually might be relevant. She was asking whether or not we could tie that particular group's salary to our living wage. It's a significant undertaking in this community to approximate what that should be each year. I would argue that although we know we answer almost exclusively to SED, that we try to be cognizant of our local community as much as possible, and this may be an area where we could at least give some serious thought to participating in that manner.
Brad?
Well, I'll caution negotiating against ourselves. We've had this conversation probably 15, 20 years ago. I've been here long enough to remember that conversation. And you'll remember we're talking about employees who work 1,300 hours a year, not 2,000.
Any Judy Max?
I'd like to thank Connor for the poem in the literary tattler for Dan Wells. I loved it. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy Max. Anyone else? And we'll keep moving. And consent agenda, and Brad is going to make his way out of the room because we don't want Brad here anymore. And while he's moving, I do need to move.
I'll move the consent agenda as presented in the agenda.
I'll second.
Second by Brad. And fairly short regarding transfers, financials. Obviously, the personnel report, there are no adjustments or amendments or additions to the personnel report. It's in your Dropbox. Any questions, comments? Good, Judy Max? Judy Max is good. If Judy Max is good, we can vote. All in favor? That is everyone, and Brad has left the room. And Brad can come back into. This is Dr. Brown, and we are ready for the superintendent's report.
Doc, are you going to mention that?
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Dainsley. If I may, I would love to speak to the personnel report briefly. One, for the folks watching at home, on the device, computer, however you're watching the meeting tonight, Mr. Granger had to step out because his wonderful daughter was one of the outstanding educators who was earning tenure tonight. Thank you. She, amongst, how many total, Bob? I think it was 11, I'm sorry. 11. An amazing group of educators. We hope they will be in our district for a long, long time. Now, on a special club for Carolina Elementary, we're building a pretty great team out there at Carolina right now. So that's why Mr. Granger had to step out, not because of anything else. I hope.
Nothing I objected to.
Second item, in the personnel report I would to speak to just briefly, a position was created and a person was appointed tonight. At the last board meeting when we talked about the budget, we talked about reorganizing central office. Yet again, over the last couple of years we've taken some hits to a position because of budgetary issues, and frankly we've gotten out of whack. We haven't been as effective as I would have liked us as a team to be at the central level. We've heard from our community, we've talked in here about us needing to look at things again. And looking at things again to be more effective while also saving money has been what the board has been tasking us to do for many, many years now. So we said we will look at our central office FTE monies, look to reorganize, and also look to save money. A pretty significant challenge. That first step in that process was tonight. It's safe to say Dr. Leno's been doing probably 4 jobs the last 2 years. We kind of want him to focus on one, maybe 2, but one primarily. Tonight we created a deputy superintendency role. We've looked at districts of our size across the state, and most of those districts have that role in them. And most of those districts, like what that person do, is be the primary point of contact for building level principals, mentoring, coaching, point of contact for a lot of different things, but also key and point for strategic initiatives, i.e. special education. They're going to be hearing him and from him and a lot of other folks tonight about special education and key projects like that to keep us in a very strategic and innovative place, which we want to be. We need him in that role. Yes, he did an outstanding job with the chief academic role. Not having Mr. Trumbull here this year has been tough. Moving away from the officer over the last year has been tough. So we're looking to settle things down a little bit and get people in the right seats on the bus. And the key to that is having Dr. Landau, one, stay with us, but I'll say, and I'll step back personally, I've said to you, when we brought him in here from Virginia, when he Skyped in on a video here.
From a closet.
From a closet. Sorry. And I both had newborns, and his son was sleeping in my house. I said to you then, this is one of the most talented educators in the country, period. But not a lot of folks knew about him. And I said to you privately, I said, we better get him now while we can afford him. And I would say I've had a chance to travel and see a lot of different folks, and a lot of folks are watching our work right now. And folks come to me when they talk about our work here in Ithaca, they also talk about Dr. Matt Landau. There are a lot of folks who would love to have him on staff, but there are a lot of folks who want to have him as superintendent. He just calls every day. And fortunately, he and I, we're committed to being in this community and doing the work for our community together. And I'm so happy that he's going to stay on with us as deputy superintendent, but some key work that needs to happen over the upcoming years. So with that, as we do with other roles, most recently with the high school principal, a guy not to be named, but we have a person moving into a different role in the organization, Dr. Matt Landau. And with that, we will keep working. We will be advertising for a chief academic officer, chief administration officer. Those advertisements will go out soon and continue to reorganize at the central level. And for folks who are wondering, yes, we're able to do these things, and we're going to save money also. And it's going to be tough for me to show that all today, but I will be showing it to the community soon, how we've been able to reorganize and also save money. So moving on, I'm so happy to see Dr. Becktimer in the room tonight. I know greatness when I see him. That I don't know if folks know, he writes for a monthly publication that all superintendents and administrators read, School Administrator, a double essay. He writes about hot topics and how we should respond to hot topics. And I'm sure he's written about superintendents not ever sending out a mass email to everyone. I didn't read that issue. I'm hoping that he's going to write about the opt-out movement and what that impact that's had on folks and how superintendents should be responding and be happy. And so without having read his opt-out piece and not seeing the piece where he said not to send out mass emails, I did something like that. But I wanted the folks to know where I stood and where we were as far as this thing. Well, it's not really an opt-out, test refusal. I put some things out there for the community, folks who are watching at home who didn't get the email. There's a letter posted on the website that speaks to the protocols and procedures for families who wish to exercise their rights as far as having their child refuse the test. With that being said, I want folks to know that the Board of Education, the educators in our district, cannot advocate one way or the other. We've taken an oath to not do that. If I were to say something about opting out or go one way or the other, I would be removed from this seat, and so would the board. And we've read communication from state ed that said so much. So there were a lot of folks who wrote back, and I sent out 7,000 emails, and I probably got 1,500 responses from folks, and many of them were questioning why we weren't doing just that. So in response, one, we couldn't do it if we wanted to. Or if I did it, I just wouldn't be here tonight. We would have you in the seat right now. But we just couldn't do that. Secondly, what people responded to me with, they felt as if attaching the opt-out movement and 95% participation rates to state and federal funding was a scare tactic. It's not a scare tactic. I won't write a letter to just scare folks. Actually, it hasn't happened yet, but we've received memos from the federal government, our state, and there are memos out there that are threatening or saying that funding can be, and we'll be talking about this later, or can be impacted based on not meeting 95% participation rates, i.e. test refusals. We don't know what that's going to look like. For me not to share with my community that it's a possibility, it wouldn't have been good. So I shared that with folks, and folks were upset because I put that in the letter, but I felt it was necessary. Another piece, I value the data we get from these assessments. Yes, I do. All tests, I have yet to see a perfect test. These tests are far from being perfect, with a valuable indicator of achievement. Specifically, we have been eliminating and closing achievement gaps across all the measures we track. And I'm very proud of our community because we track so many different measures. in our community, when the state test results are released, it's not on the front page of the paper as the only indicator that we look at when we determine whether or not young people are achieving or not. That's a win for us. One of them. That speaks to the value of our understand data. With that being said, we do learn from it. When getting our data back from these three, we have recognized some achievement gaps. It's something we're thinking about. It's helping us with our program evaluation, our assessment practices. Good information. One time a year, every young person in the state takes the same test. That provides us a valuable indicator also. Some valuable information when taking a common assessment of sorts, and we've been advocating for common assessment for 5 years now. This is yet another common assessment. It provides us with some valuable data. The perseverance associated, we talked about having young people being college and career ready or future ready. Perseverance and grit is a part of that. Taking an assessment for 90 minutes is how one develops perseverance and grit, whether it's a good test or a bad test. So there are some good assessments. I want our young people to take it, but I also understand that folks have rights as far as the test refusal approach. Completely and fundamentally disagree with I said that to our Secretary of Education, I've said that to our President, who brought this in, by the way. It's inappropriate to do that, and I will always say that it's inappropriate, but I will never advocate for us not to take the test. So just, instead of me answering another thought where we are as a district, that is where we are. Protocol as far as how one... So thank you for providing me the opportunity to clear up some things, recognize
we need to do that really before we get to the final budget stages. No, come on up, Matt, and your group. And we'll sure. And Matt, before you get started, Eldred's has a point.
So I didn't want to wait until you guys are done with this, but I also want to applaud Matt, Dr. Landau, for what he's brought to this district. It's hard for people to see through our forests, to see individual trees. I'll just list a couple of things that Matt has done that has changed this district in ways that we should all be thanking him for. When I ran for the board 6 years ago now, we really had 8 different siloed elementary schools. We now have a single platform, not complete homogeneity, but we now have a single platform on which we are trying to deliver education to those smallest people in our district. Hopefully the teachers, hopefully the building leaders, hopefully the parents have recognized that significant contribution. When I joined, there were pockets of administrative activities right in this building that the previous had sort of drawn into the building that needed to be returned to individual schools. And that has happened relatively smoothly. One we're talking about tonight, AIS and special education, is now to a much larger extent where it should be. It should be sitting with principals in buildings because that's where service is delivered to children. The third thing, instructional coaching. That was a model that was out there. We wanted to do it. We weren't sure how we were going to do it. Matt led the way in partnering with our friends at Cornell to begin, not just to bring it, but to roll it out in a way that didn't terrorize or further terrorize teachers and let them understand that we're trying to be partners in this effort. Curriculum development, I'm sure teachers, I'm sure parents, he's sitting there with Lee, the work that we have done to try and create not an environment where every child has an IEP, but certainly a recognition that differentiated instruction is really matters, and that it can actually be delivered in the time that we have in classrooms. Again, this is under Matt's watch. So I know it's difficult, again, for the public to see what each of the administrators do, so Lavelle's always shifting and trying to bring us quality and effectiveness, but I personally want to thank you again, Matt. It's been fantastic working with you, and I can't wait to see what we do in this new role.
We're not done yet. Go ahead.
No, it was a bad process. I was waiting to try to jump in when Doc was giving his superintendent's report as well. But I should say, as someone who's been in this community for a little bit of time as well, but also who's been a former ITA member and gone through the tenure process, I'm very much aware that the excellent and hard work that those 11 folks have put in, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't give them a round of applause for achieving a significant status in our community. So congratulations to all our teachers who received tenure this evening. I'm done, Rob.
Oh, no, I mean, we're just moving along because we had a long agenda, but I appreciate the comments, and well, we will get started with...
The tenure folks will be invited as they have been.
To the combination.
Thank you.
Sure.
So let's have good attendance.
Well, since we're all talking, but I appreciate everything that you all do, but we still come back to the special education update, but you know, I guess we have talked about that special piece, and that really, it's an education plan for all the students in this district, Dr. Brown. It's, we talked about that. It's, you know, and that's, so we're going to get an update, and so we'll, does it have to be special anymore? But go ahead, and we'll move on.
Thank you for the opportunity to share tonight. We know there's a lot of other things on. And so tonight we're just, actually I just want to take a second to back up, but I should thank you Eldred and the board, Dr. Brown, for the new opportunity. It feels good to be able to continue doing many of the things I'm already doing, and very excited to just get right back to it tomorrow morning. And I should also mention that you're not aware of this, but this occasion warranted my wife's second viewing of a board meeting. She's watching, and my son's first viewing, and that he, when you started talking, he started talking back at the television. So thinking that Louvel was talking to him. So we're going to put a stop to that when we get back home. But anyway, thank you. So tonight we do want to focus on the word update because this is such a huge thing. And so and when we started to dig in to the work this year, we really realized that it's a lot bigger than just kind of taking a couple strategies out of the plan and putting a couple and asking your blessing or permission to continue. That it really involves quite a bit of digging in and really looking carefully at things and making some thoughtful plans. So what we want to do tonight is just briefly update you on some data that was shared in a finance committee meeting by Sheila. We wanted to, so Sheila will share that part. Lee was here to share about some of the work that's been happening this year. We wanted to be really clear that while we are in the process of making revisions to a plan, that that doesn't stop us at all from carrying the work forward. And a lot of that has been in the area of professional development. And then finally, we established an advice. I, for some reason, gave it the longest name one could possibly give it. It was the Special Education Plan Advisory Committee, and then we started to think of it as the Advisory Committee right now. And the charge of the Advisory Committee was to really help us thoughtfully look at some aspects of the plan that need change and need some attention. And so I also wanted to, we have a few of the members of the committee here in the audience tonight. We have Karen Kiesel, sorry, from a special education teacher from the high school, Susan Eschbach, principal of UJM, Josh Borns, Starkey, and Ruth Marr, who are also members of the committee. We have several other members of the committee as well, but I thank the folks that came tonight. I know Doug Long is also a member of the committee. He emailed me and couldn't come tonight, but said he'd be watching as well. And so they are here to give counsel and advice or answer questions if needed to. So this is, I'd say our motto. This is kind of my personal motto this year. That and I'm hesitant to say this in front of the board and Dr. Brown because so it's, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Because you all want to go fast and far, and I get that. But we've really tried to instill a spirit of there's a lot of different opinions on the work that we're doing. And we have done a lot of intentional work in really trying to listen to each other, in trying to draw commonalities instead of differences, and also have as many sort of different groups that are involved in special education in our community as to be a part of that process. So that's something that we've stuck with. I also wanted to just highlight this. This was a vision that was created, I think about 7 years ago. Okay, longer than that, about 9 or 10. And so we, probably the biggest area of focus for us has been on that very first part, to find ways to create and sustain an inclusive education. So what was interesting, we've done some group activities around this vision, and which shouldn't be a surprise. Some of the people that were involved in the creation of that vision are on this new committee, and there's areas where we want to make some revisions, but we also want to focus on strategies in the work too. So this is something that we'll get back to. But I think the first line is probably the area of our greatest emphasis, and so you'll hear that strand as we go through our presentations. We wanted to very briefly, we're not putting a lot of data in front of you on a slide, obviously there's just 2 numbers up there. I did ask Danielle to put some things in your Dropbox. It was things that Sheila shared at a finance committee. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the original focus, one of the original major goals of the Special Education Improvement Plan, and that was classification rates. So Sheila was just going to briefly talk about that.
Yeah, as you see, the classification rate has decreased over a period of time. And I think when the Finance Committee, the handout I gave you, I showed you over a period of years. And so I was thinking about the reasons why that may be, and I went back to the Continuous Improvement Plan and looked at some of the strategies and the progress we've made in implementing some of the work that's in this plan. So some of the reasons, and there are many reasons, and they may not be all the reasons, but some things that come to mind, I think, in looking at this plan. We've certainly made, we're looking at the educational benefit that students are receiving as a result of special education services much more closely. We did a lot of work around that, a lot of training, and I think the result of that is improved progress monitoring and better aligned IEPs. Also at meetings, declassification as appropriate is addressed. Again, we have work to do there. The progress that we're making is strategy number 4, and Lee will probably speak more about this, it addresses professional development. But briefly, I think there are more opportunities for teams of teachers, co-teachers to come together, LCs and grade level meetings to talk about students and instruction. There's much more targeted PD, I think, around co-teaching differentiation, and we really tapped into the offerings that TST BOCES as well as OCM BOCES has offered us. Strategy number 5 speaks about language interventions. What I think what we've done and are continuing to do, many more students are receiving speech language services, OT services, assistive technology through an RTI model. One of the things that every speech language therapist or pathologist has some RTI, students receiving RTI services on their caseload, and that has been done very deliberately. Also, much more emphasis on pushing into the classroom for services, especially around OT and speech. One of the things I tried to do this year with mixed success is have each OT push into a kindergarten classroom once a week. And support students and teachers supporting students that way, again through an RTI framework. Because of some leaves of absence, FTE issues and so forth, we haven't been able to do that in every single building as consistently I'd like, but certainly that is, the OTs embrace that, and certainly that's a model that I'm going to continue to work on, because I think many of the concerns that do rise to the CSE referral level can be addressed much sooner by having that OT push into the classroom through some issues. In terms of strategy number 6, that's around behavior. We've done a lot work with that, and I certainly give credit to Lee Talcott for kind of showing some leadership around TCI, therapeutic crisis intervention. But in every building in the district, there is some version of PBIS, positive behavioral intervention supports, restorative practices, and also there has been training around therapeutic crisis intervention. So buildings have, building-wide behavioral expectations, positive behavioral supports in place, and also we're doing some training around, as I said, crisis intervention, and that will continue, and speak more to that as well. In terms of strategy number 7, that's all around pre-referral, referral procedures. I think we've become much more rigorous about targeting interventions, and when a student is referred to the CSE, teams know that we need documentation of what interventions were applied within the RTI framework before that referral can move on. So I think that tighter process has been helpful. Also, have been and will continue to collect and review building level referral data. I'm having conversations with building principals and CSE chairs around interventions and pre-referral procedures and support. So that work will continue. So a lot of work to do. I think we have accomplished a lot. We still have work to do, and I think this plan has really kind of given us that kind of guide to kind of help us move toward addressing that classification issue.
So one of our major focus areas for this year has been on professional development in a tight budget year. We always try to make links to budget, either things in the budget or budget initiatives. And I want to make that link in talking about Lee Ginnenthal. At one time, there were many more teachers on special assignment than there are now. Lee is the one that we have this year. And Lee is instrumental in providing professional development in lots of areas. Special education happens to be one. But he has done some very powerful work, both with special education and general education teachers in terms of how they work together. But also a very new initiative for us is working with our paraprofessionals. The public comment tonight, there was a discussion about one aspect of the life of a paraprofessional. Another is their union actually approached us and said we need more professional development. We need training. And so we were actually planning that when they came to us, and so we thought it was a great moment. But we really tip our hats to them for coming to us and asking for some things too. And the other thing that we noticed when Lori Bruce-Jow was in the Chief Excellence Officer role, she did a number of community events where parents were able to share some of their experiences. And a number of parents said, the person who spends the most time with my child, in fact 6 hours a day, is a paraprofessional, is one of the ESPs in our district. And I'm not certain how much support they're getting or help they're getting. And so when we started this year, Lee and I had some very targeted conversations about ways to just flip that basically around and to do something that we really haven't done before.
So, last year I started just on the parent-teacher conference days with training for the ESP staff. The problem is they don't stay for staff meetings because they're not paid. They're working with kids all the time. There is very little time to access them. So last year I started with the parent-teacher conference day, and there was over 100 folks in 2-hour blocks through the day, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, 12 to 2, moving through just to get something going. And although that was a good start, it wasn't how I would want to do things. It's not how I would do things with teachers. I said, why am I doing that with the ESP staff? This year, we switched to giving ESP staff choices. We listened not only to their leadership, but as I went from building to building, I talked to folks. I said, what do you need training in? What do you need support in? And they came up with a list. Every parent-teacher conference afternoon, so that's 4 afternoons this year, there were a choice of 6 to 8 topics. The ESP staff got to choose what they took a look at. On our superintendent's conference day, which we now call PLC day, typically the ESP staff were an afterthought. It's kind of like, oh, so what are we going to do for them? This year we turned that around and we said, no, we're doing a special morning dedicated specifically to ESP staff. Dr. Brown did a keynote address to an auditorium of the ESP staff. And then they went off and we had 8 selections. Folks did 3 different sessions that morning. Topics that meant a lot to them. Some of the things folks asked for was working with students with autism. Skills, how do we do that? Autism spectrum it's complicated, and the ESP staff typically are staff that have the least amount of formal training, and they're placed with the students with the greatest need. Working with students with attention deficit disorder, working with students with challenging behavior. What was interesting is as we took a look at win-win kind of approaches in dealing with challenging behavior, not going to a powering approach or a permissive approach, but that middle way, it became apparent that these were skills that we needed to use not only with students with challenging behavior, but with each other. When we have a paraprofessional working with a teacher, or an administrator, or a parent, we're coming together. Those are the exact same skills. We took a look at Common Core. What does that mean? What are the shifts all about in English and in math, and how as an ESP can they help kids move forward? After every single session, the one thing I heard over and over was, are you doing this with our teachers? They need the exact same thing. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to say yes, because we don't have the release time for teachers to be getting the same training. The training that I'm offering to the ESPs is exactly the same training that I do when I'm with teachers. It's not watered down. It's the exact same thing. They're gaining from it. I just got a call from one ESP staff member who was doing a presentation to DSS for foster parents, and they want training like we're offering to foster parents, and they were asking if that was something I'd be able to do. Those are the kind of bridges we need to do so that there's connection between community and school, and it's all one piece. In terms of supporting teachers, although we haven't had a lot of release time, Jen Gondek, who's the inclusion specialist at BOCES, and I have continued to offer inclusive PLCs, specifically for elementary folks and for secondary folks, 2 separate sessions. She's been running them, I sit on it, and I provide in-building support to all the participants afterwards. Any teacher in the district, gen ed or special ed or paraprofessional who needs help can get in touch with me. Principals do too, and I've been in most of the buildings this year. Sitting down, taking a look at situations, problem solving with folks, co-teaching with them, modeling lessons, observing, giving feedback. So it's been a lot going on with just one person chasing around, but I'm enjoying it, and I'm hoping next year that there will be maybe some more time when I can sit down with folks and spend more reflective time to continue this kind of work. One quick thing in terms of numbers, at the parent-teacher conference afternoons when we've done the trainings, there have been upwards of 80 ESP staff attending. In previous years on parent-teacher conference, where the ESP staff were? Home. Because there was really nothing for them to do. Or if they were in the schools, they were Xeroxing. This is such a different use of their time, and it makes such a difference. There have been some principals who have figured out, well, in 3 buildings so far in the district, I'm doing monthly trainings where they figured out ways to have ESP staff cover for each other. And when you've got ongoing training, you know, in some of the buildings I started in September or October, things are really starting to happen. Those folks, when we come to district-wide training sessions, are speaking out, they're taking leadership roles, and I'm talking to them here, having some of them step up to the plate, and they'll be doing some of the training.
So, I just want to reiterate again the work that Lee has done with the variety of staff people that are working with our students has been outstanding this year. And he's made some references to basically our tough budget year this year, and that there was indeed less teacher release time. and less ability to do some of the professional development things that we have gotten used to. I know later tonight there'll be a deep discussion about the budget, and I know part of that might be some discussion about ways to increase professional development, because that's something that is one of the keys to moving this forward. I mentioned at the beginning of the year I made the decision to not I made the decision to be the sole decision maker regarding the plan, that it would be best to create some sort of structure where a diverse group of folks could give input and have conversation and discussion. And like I said, try to find common ground, knowing that we may not always be in agreement about everything. And so just in full honesty, my attempt to facilitate this amazing group the first 2 times probably was not stellar. And as soon as I let go of the reins of trying to facilitate and let people like Lee do a little facilitating and others, the work of the group has really taken off. Part of the taking off of the group has been a decision to break this fairly large group into some smaller groups. So what we're focused on as a group is to really, like I said, look at things like the special education vision statement, to look at things more specifically like professional development, family engagement, and also creating more inclusive structures in our buildings. And so this work, because it's all volunteer, has been slow and steady, but what we're starting to see come out of it is we hope to be some really rich strategies that we hope to put out. One of the things in this work, and I'm not sure if these are very well worded, I was kind of doing this, changing it and changing it and changing it, and then it was time for the meeting to start. But one of the things that we've seen is there's been some tensions. I don't mean tensions in the completely negative way that word is used, but there's just some things that we're sort of noticing in the conversations of this group. And one is how do you exactly do this? How do you become more inclusive? There's different opinions on how we do that, and so in these conversations we're trying to figure out ways to do that. One of the things that we've identified, and I think we're all in agreement as a group, is to start to try to be clear about beliefs, and to also start with leadership. And so one of the things that we're looking to start this summer is some focused work with leaders in our district on what really makes a truly inclusive environment, and what do you do to sustain it as well. And what exactly is, there's some tension around that, just to sort of name one of the, it's not an elephant in the room with our group because we just put it out there, but there we have some parents that want something that's more restrictive. We have some students that we think sometimes need, for maybe their safety or for their health, something that's more restrictive. This is a tension in our group, and so it's something that we haven't solved, but it's something that I think through our conversation we're finding more commonalities than probably differences. Another one that I think is of great interest to me is how to measure the improvement once we've established some of our strategies. We've looked at things like, Sheila talked about identification rates, and when we come back in June with our plan, with a fully revised plan to show you, we'll look more deeply at some of the data. But one of the things that has become very apparent to me in years prior is that there is a lot of really deep, rich qualitative data in the district special education experience. And by qualitative, I mean people's stories, people's feelings about what it's like when their child is not identified, or their child is made to feel inferior by another student, or the list goes on and on. But to go beyond those stories, which are very, very powerful, how do we establish a baseline for what that is, and then how do we begin to measure that improvement? So an area that we're thinking, but this is an area where we're going to collaborate with Dr. Brown with some of his expertise around this, is to find ways to survey. Let's survey people who go through the CSE process, or survey people who go through, making modifications to an IEP, to survey students. That's something that we haven't been doing. That's another sort of next step that we want to get into before the end of this year, because we want to create this baseline data now. so we have some better sense of what our goals should be. So, as you can see, we could probably go on and on about this for quite a long time, but I think I might have one, and I've already talked about some of this stuff. We're really looking to do some targeted work with our leaders this summer. We want to create additional professional development. I very briefly discussed that in the Finance Committee yesterday, and I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about the budget. But Lee already mentioned more release time for teachers, some summer work for teachers and paraprofessionals, some work where we both have some in-house expertise and collaboration in-house, but also maybe some outside folks too. And then one of the other things we are going to start working on, communicate. That again could be through some surveys of people's experiences through the process, but also to just do a formal review of the way we communicate through letters and whatnot, like how the special education process. I want to give a big thanks to SEPTA, the Special Education Parent-Teacher Association, because at the very beginning of the year, they provided me and the three of us with a really thoughtfully well done sort of revision, critique, I'm not sure exactly what to call it, of the current plan. And what they basically said, to summarize, is that we really had two plans within a plan. One was about sort of those pre-strategies, like, meeting children where they are before they need special education, helping the classroom environment, having a rich curriculum for all students, and helping teachers be the best they can be. But then there was a second part of the plan, that is for students who are identified. And what they felt was that part of the plan needed to be strengthened. I kind of thought, instead of just taking their feedback, like sitting down, like I said, typing some changes up, putting it in front of you, it'd be better to engage in a dialogue and to sort of cast a wide net in terms of having people involved in that. I think after all of these meetings, we're ready to really start putting some things down, making these next steps fully realized, and bringing a full plan to you in June with some more data to look at. But these are some immediate things that we want to accomplish. And again, the richness of this work, and I'm not even sure if I'm doing it justice, is really due to the gift of voluntary hours that all the folks on this committee have given us. So to the people in the crowd who have been joining us for the last 7 months with lots of meetings, thank you. We appreciate it.
Just jump in with one more piece. We need your commitment to stick with this so that it becomes an ongoing, continuous plan, something that we sustain. It's not going to be a flash in the pan kind of thing. I've been working in special ed now, well, next year will be my 40th year. And over that period of time, every year we think we're there or almost there. And it continues to change and it continues to evolve. And there's not going to be a time where we'll say, we're done with special education. We've created an inclusive environment. There are going to be things that we can't even imagine that will be challenges for us to deal with. So what we need is that long-term commitment. The plan we're looking at developing is going to be strategic. It's prioritized. We're not going to get it done in 1 year. But the problem is, we have kids who are only going to be juniors at LACS or 5th graders at BJM only this 1 year, and we need to make that big difference in their life. But we need to know that we can't get it all done, and we have to prioritize, and we need the support from you guys to stick with it for the long haul and keep us focused. So thank you.
Questions? Yes.
Oh yes.
Questions? Go ahead, Chris.
My question is more of a statement, but thank you for putting this together simply, and you answered a lot of the questions with your next steps. And actually, thank you, Lee, for doing this good work, and all of you. But definitely great work. When we speak about measurement, have you guys thought about the process and what that looks like? Because it sounds like you've trying to establish the baseline, but what do you look like for that, just so we can see what...
Well, for measurement on the quantitative side, we do want to use the assessments that the district's already using. To be quite honest, and I wasn't at all thinking I was going to mention opt-out or test refusal, but I think Ithaca's participation numbers are about 85%, and so we're going to really need to rely on our district data probably more than ever in terms of using those results as benchmarks. The thing that we really want to try to go after, and we have struggled to find models of this in other districts, so that's why it's been a little bit more slow of a process, but is to find some good, more qualitative measures. One of the things in a lot of our conversations that we're finding is some people have a fantastic experience, or everything kind of, the entire process just works for them, and other people don't. And it's a very, whether it's good or not so good, it's a very emotional experience for all involved. And so we want to find ways to kind of capture that more experiential thing. And again, I'm not exactly sure at this point what that's going to look like. And I know Dr. Brown has talked to us about some surveys, some ways of doing some surveys that we think might capture that in a more broad way. So we want to do both quantitative student learning kind of benchmarks, but also some more qualitative ones too.
We don't want to add more things onto the plate of kids and staff members, though, to do. So one of the things we're exploring, there's been work done taking a look at the Danielson framework and paralleling that with inclusive practices with very clear examples, so that we could sit down with administrators and teaching staff and say, okay, this is what a 4 looks like in inclusive practices. Here's specific examples. So we're using our existing structure, and then, through the data we gather through teacher observation, we can process that kind of stuff. So that's just, another piece we're looking at.
I saw one of our members, Josh.
Well, I was going to... Hi.
See it.
So, not only, as Matt says, do surveys and getting people's stories, as Matt has been doing, collecting stories, start to give you some things of how things run together. And there's also performance data, like Matt was suggesting, and teacher observation data, as Leah suggested. In between there are methods of measuring that a lot of schools and districts have used successfully in doing equity audit within the school about how we're doing on these different pieces. Those are things actually the leaders in our district have seen in the past. We may not have used them a lot, but those are there. Those are techniques that have been used really effectively to get a handle on, okay, so where are we, where do we want to go, and how are we going to get there, and how will we know when we got there. And in that sense, inclusion is understood in the same way that the work got started out here, which is it's beyond just kids who are identified as having disabilities. It's also recognizing that can often be a mask for the ways in which the district and a school deals with children with respect to race, class, gender, and so forth. But it shows up in a disability set, right? Those are tried and true methods, and again, the team has done a great job, I think, of recognizing that districts that move forward on this, schools that move forward on this, have leaders who know exactly where they're going, and that's really clear. And then once folks know where they're going, we work out democratically how we're going to get there, and that involves everybody to get it done. And the team feels to me has done a really good job of getting that and moving that forward as a basic strategy.
Other questions for the group? Jay, go ahead.
So, Chris mentioned it, and I have the same concerns about measurement. And so Josh just mentioned that there's like an audit method, and it was mentioned that you may do surveys. And so I just want to chime in with what I think it's really, you gave us that one figure about the classification rate, and I'm afraid that that a board and decision makers and it's got to be really, you got to have information that's very simple, clear, and informational. But it can be all those things that you've mentioned. Even we do a survey among the students. A number that I focus on and that others do, I know, is: do you feel you have an adult that you can confide in or go to? That's not really measurable. I mean, that's just a survey, but boy, that's a huge, to me anyway, I think that's a huge kind of a number to have, and it's a number that you can have 1 year and compare against the next year.
Yeah.
And so I think, a whole mix, you refer to that, so a whole mix of some information, but just as that, classification, you go, yeah, you're so you sit here and that's okay, we got it.
Yep.
And then likewise, so as you develop information and measurements, things like that are needed. I think of and I don't know what you're already collecting, and maybe it's, I think of RTI, and there's those steps and the movements, and you talk about inclusiveness, and even the difficulty of defining that and then measuring it. But you know what? Define it and measure it.
Yeah.
Don't let that stop you from doing it. You've got to have some definition and okay.
Yeah.
And then from there, as Lisa, this can't be put on the book. This is something you got to carry every year.
Yeah.
And so at least then you can begin to see the trends and can bring it to the board and to the community, so that and then adjust it and tweak it.
What I'll simply say to that is I think that's great counsel, and just to fully on my side that this is a very incomplete update at this point. This is more of a, we are doing some stuff, we exist, and what we're planning on doing is coming back in June with some like more of a data story to tell instead of just a quick update on one little piece.
Elder, go ahead, then Sean.
One way we've gotten to Jay's point in the past is we've added these systemic issues to our board priorities. And if I remember correctly, there's nothing in it right now that speaks specifically to this population. And I don't know if we've addressed it before, even in sessions where we go behind closed doors and get right. So, for example, Judy looking at me like,
yeah, I'm trying to think
like I'm speaking in Sanskrit. Well, here's an example. So we know.
Is this to any other different? Go ahead.
We've talked about wanting to increase our participation in extracurricular activities, right? David is presenting.
It says disability in the. Yeah, no, disability.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Elder. Go ahead.
The point I'm making is it might be time to add that language even more specific. We say we want to increase children's participation in extracurricular activities. Might it be time to specifically mention this population? Right? When we say that we want to raise some class or not, and maybe disability is in that one, but is it time to actually be specific and including that language in all of our priorities? Because Judy, I know it's there as a word, but I
think we put it in. I think it was one of the last things in the last 3 years.
Well, it's been a part of the equity goal for quite a while.
The equity goal, but I'm saying is it actually embedded in each one of those things that we claim we're going to do to march forward in the future.
I felt it was there. It wasn't explicit.
Well, that's the problem, right?
As
we prioritize has been explicit.
As we cast that net wider in terms of the arena that we want all students to participate in, we need to provide support for staff in those positions. And we haven't done training for coaches and folks in that whole end of things. It's one thing having somebody participate. It's one thing, another thing, having them feel like they're part of it.
We can change the language. You do your job.
I'm working on my job for a long time, and we'll continue. Thank you.
Sean?
Yeah, I'll make it, to try to make it quick. I really appreciate the slide that talks about some of the, and the way in which it was trying to describe about Dr. Lando as well, the tensions, and it's probably not the right term, but there's some sort of rub. And so I know that Ruth and I, for example, had a conversation about the district's desire to try to lower our classification rate, at the same point in time to ensuring that all students who need services get the best services. And so the document was skewed particularly one direction, so I really appreciated the fact that we've been having a much richer, nuanced conversation about what we're talking about and what students are we trying to provide, and how we're trying to provide the best supports for. And along with that, from a number of communications that I've had, some folks in the room have also been participating in our, it seems like, year-long review of special education policies, which will continue sometime soon. But one of the things that keep coming up is the role that we have as a district in terms of our communication with parents. So it's really glad, and caregivers, so I'm really glad to see that up there as being a review, that one of the things that we can possibly do to ease that experience of negative experiences is by trying to take a look at how we communicate. Do our part, because I would imagine while it's emotional for us working with folks, it's still not always our babies directly, so it's probably much more emotional for parents and caregivers than it is for folks, and so to be sensitive to that. But I've been reading the minutes from the meetings and greatly appreciate the work and the volunteer folks have put out. It's fantastic.
Susan, did you have?
Just wanted to say something that actually was very close to what you just said, Sean, is that, I have the privilege and honor regularly to be working with teachers who know that those babies are their babies too.
Oh, absolutely.
And that while we all can have our frustrations at what it takes to help some children succeed because their struggle is greater than someone else's, and a lot of times those kids are not necessarily identified as having special needs. They're often children who don't even have the benefit of the special ed system to sort of help navigate to support them. I know that we can move these, create more and sustain greater inclusive environments, because I watch people every day throw their heart and soul into it, and then when asked or challenged about perhaps maybe that child shouldn't be with them or with us, they have stood up in meetings and say, I don't want to work in a place where that would be true. And I've been very honored to be around that. So.
Anything else? There is in your Dropbox for tonight, and certainly in past finance, was all the data that was provided to the finance committee, all those numerics regarding how many children, costs, etc. So that's not going to go up on the board tonight, but we've had that. Certainly, if there's any questions to those numbers, feel free. We can address that as we keep talking the rest of the night. Anything else for this group?
Any questions for any of the members of the committee?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we're good. Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Matt. So I think we're going to take a 5-minute break so I can get more water, and then we're going to talk about budget. I can't wait to see.
have us up here. So as you know, since the last time I was here, there's been some changes on the state level. We actually were delivered, there was a budget that was delivered to us from the governor's office, which was very exciting, but also causes a lot of confusion. And so the first part of this presentation is really to try to bring some clarity, some understanding around state aid, and believe me, this is, everyone that's in the field, state aid is very confusing, and so there's reports out if you look at the governor's runs, and then there are reports if you look at the projected budget, and then there's reports of what you actually receive. So we're going to try to demystify a bit, okay? And then that'll set the stage for real knowledge base of what we actually are going to be receiving, and then we're going to have a conversation about what that would look like for us as a district. Fair enough? Okay, so slide, Danielle. As I said, so there's been some media, right? There's been a lot of publicity, not just in Ithaca. The state aid is delivered to the schools in New York State. And so, you know, there was a lot of questions coming up about, is it true really that the Ithaca City School District is getting a $2.5 million increase in state aid?
Yeehaw, great.
Oh, yeah, that would be terrific. That would be terrific. So next slide. So please know, again, before I jump into things, I'm going to just go back to the basics. So for those of you that have sat through already maybe 4 or 5 meetings with me, you're getting used to my voice, although melodic, it probably is wearing on you. And so, that you might have heard this already. There are 3 really different lenses that you could look at state aid, okay? There is the actual governor's budget, the state aid runs that he delivers to the districts, and those are, as we'll see, estimates of what he believes that if our data was accurate in the state systems and that all things were going well and we spent all the money we said, that we would receive certain amounts of money. There's actually then the actual aid received by the district. That is really the checks or electronic transfers that come into our district that we real money, right?
Which is always less than the first line.
We will see that. I actually have a few slides to sort of illustrate that point. And yes, this is always going to be less than the governor's aid runs, and I'll explain why. And then there's the proposed budgeted. The proposed budgeted state aid is what we as a district, right, we look at trends, we compare them to the governor's state aid runs, we say, what do you think our behaviors are going to be coming forward? What are we going to be spending? Our budget look like compared to what we actually think we're going to do, and we make adjustments to the state aid, and that it goes forward to the taxpayers, to the voters, so that they can see what we think is a logical estimate or a logical sort of understanding of what state aid is, okay, for our district. So those 3 different lenses, remember that. So let's go to the first slide. It looks a little bit crowded, but let me explain it. You can all walk through this with me. So this is a real year, okay? So this is actually a year that has been closed out. We've actually know that this has been audited, that this is a year that we've already experienced, okay? So if you walk through this with me, here's the governor's runs. We received 2 pieces of paper, one in January, one usually in about March, April, okay? And it says, Ithaca City School District. Guess what? You are going to receive, based on our estimates, $20 million, right? $26.7 million. Super great news, if that were accurate, right? If you take a look at what we proposed in that year for budgeted state aid, because we knew this was going to be an overestimate, we adjusted down, right? We said this is not going to really be actualized by us. We will not see this money. So we budgeted and we went to the voters with an estimate of state aid of $26 million for, okay? A difference of $278,000. So we proposed a budget that was under the governor's run. Very, very, very bright move, because in reality we received $25,755,413, a difference from the budgeted amount of $707,000. Now I've showed a chart to you over the past few years of what we've budgeted and what we've actually received. And so that was on, those are in the Dropbox, they're also on the budget page on our website. So if you want to refer to those, there for you. But as you can see here, if we were just to look at the governor's runs, we would always be overestimating our revenue. Okay? And so, next slide please, Daniel.
So it's almost $1 million difference between.
That's right. You want to go back one? It's actually right here. The total. total unrealized state aid of almost $1
From the
million.
governor's run and what was actually received.
That is correct.
So not to put a fine enough point on this, but if we actually budgeted 26,741 in 2013-14 budget, we'd be at a deficit of $1 million.
That is correct.
Because we would not have that money coming in from checks from the state.
That is correct. That is correct. And so,
Will you tell us why that's the case, or are you going to get into that later?
I can get into that. I can get into that in just a moment. Okay. So the next slide here is the state aid. So this is again from the governor's office. Okay. And just to make the point, I did try to use all caps. This is an estimated number. Okay. This is the world that we're living in right now. This current fiscal year. This is the world that we're entering into. The budget that we will be proposing. All right. And so as you can see, yes, in fact, if you read, the media that was out there, the governor's state aid runs say that we actually did receive an increase of almost $2.5 million just on estimate to estimate, apples to apples, right? Now, the great question that Sean asked is, well, why is this so? So when the estimates from the governor's office come out, they are listed by all different types of aid that we receive. All right. One of the increases that we do realize that we will be getting is an increase in foundation aid. That's a formula aid. It's based on our number of students that we have, our wealth ratios. Many factors go into that formula, and then it's sort of spit out by a computer with very deep level of understanding to get it right. And it comes to us and says, this is your foundation aid. There are many other aids like that. There's high-cost aid for students that we know that really will be costing us a lot of money to be able to sustain their in a way that's powerful, right? We need to be able to hire additional support staff for them, perhaps skilled nursing, right? So that those young people also have some supports. That's also generated by a formula. There are some aids that are in that list from the governor that are actually based on our behaviors or what we actually purchase or what we actually do. Two examples of those are BOCES aid and transportation aid. All right? BOCES aid is aid that's generated based on the programming that we purchase from BOCES, and that generates an aid ratio. Usually in Ithaca, it's usually about 50 cents to the dollar, but it's not dollar for dollar. Only certain things are aidable in BOCES. Only up to $30,000 of a person's salary is aidable. Only services that, they fall into certain categories. What the governor uses to project these numbers is our budget, which is an estimate. We think we're going to spend this much. We also budget in BOCES contingencies for the what-ifs. We have students moving into the district that will need special education services. We do budget for certain slots, a number of slots that are additional. We know that we may not use all of our career and tech ed spots, but we budget for them. Those numbers are used to generate the state aid. This will always be an overestimate. Transportation, same thing. Our budget, we hope, will always actually reflect whatever contingency costs along with the actual costs that we will incur. So any additional runs that we might anticipate, any overtime costs, any chartering, right? We will put that into the budget. We hope to not use that. But that's, again, the number that the governor's office uses to generate these state aid runs. Is there any questions about that? Okay, great. So the next slide then. So this is the runs out of the governor's office, an estimated. So let's compare that now to the actual anticipated dollars that we're going to receive. Okay? And so this is what we actually receiving. We've sat down, we looked at our actual spending habits, what we really are going to purchase from BOCES, what we're really going to do in transportation. We've looked at our formula generated aids. We've assessed, okay, are the numbers accurate as our population numbers change? And we estimate that, and these are actually sort of listed as receipts almost on the state aid website. You can go there and you can find out exactly how much. And they say this is what's going to be due to you, this is what's already been received. And unfortunately, they don't line up with the aid runs. So foundation aid is listed on the aid run, lottery aid is listed on this part of the website. Neither will they ever meet, right? We also get video lottery aid and taxes. We get a number of other aids that don't match up with the state aid, the budget runs from the governor's office. But with good estimation, I think we're going to get, all right? We also looked at the governor's budget runs. We looked at our budget, we looked at what we think we're really going to spend, and we absolutely need to adjust always down our BOCES aid and our transportation aid. We think we're going to get all of foundation aid, and so our best actual anticipated estimate, right, is going to be this $27.7 million for this coming year. Right? That's our estimate. And again, we anticipate that this will be coming if everything sort of aligns perfectly, right? So, next slide, please, Danielle.
What's the bottom part?
Oh, you can go back for a second. That shows a difference then. So from one year, the year that we're living in, to next year, in actual anticipated revenue from state aid, we believe that we would get an increase of $1.4 million. Okay?
As opposed to their 2.1.
Very different, right. So $1 million margin of error, right? Okay, so the next slide, please, Danielle, thank you, is finally then what we would budget, or what we would propose to budget, okay? And so if we were to believe that the actual anticipated revenue is correct, that number I just carried forward to this next slide here, and then this is what we budgeted actually for this current year. If you go back and you didn't recycle your budget packet, which I'm sure you didn't, I'm sure you refer to that often, this number is listed there in the state aid as the total amount, okay? And so what we believe in terms of our budgeted state aid, so if we were to go forward with this number of what we believe to receive, the difference in the budgeted amount from what we are today to where we want to be next year would be $634,000. Okay? Again, I tried to do slides that compared apples to apples, oranges to oranges, and pears to pears. Right? Because right now, depending on how you look at it, it's really very difficult because there's just a lack of understanding because it's really difficult to understand. Okay? So this will be the number, if we the number we're going to go forward with tonight, and that's part of our conversation, is this would be what would be in your budget packet, in your mailer, okay? Anything that you would pick up at the library or any of the information that we would send out.
Just keep following. Now we're down 1.8.
Sure.
Right?
Well, can we go back one slide as well? So, I'm sorry, can we go forward one slide, the slide we're on? So if I'm reading this correctly, that in 2014, 2015, our best thinking that we actually put in the budget was 27.1.
That's right.
However, for 2014, 2015, to go back a slide,
yes,
we're anticipating that we're going to get 26.3. So again, we overestimated by $700,000.
That's right.
Right. So we put into a budget last year that we'd get 27, even though we're going to get 26 this year.
That is correct.
And so we're being mindful of that when we start looking at state runs, the governor's budget, and what we're going to be budgeting for this year.
That is correct. That is correct. And so, there's always adjustments to aid throughout the year. There's also changes in our behaviors, right? In what we're purchasing and what we're doing. A lot of the efficiencies that we work on, a lot of times those things might they do change things. Also, there are factors at a state level where there might be, they recalculate things and say, oh, we overpaid you. We're going to hold back money because you received too much building aid 3 years ago, right? And so this is a normal occurrence. Trying to sort of really hone in on that actual amount as close as possible because if we continue to overpay, right, as a revenue stream, that's dangerous for us as a district. We need to be able to really get that to a place. This was the number, that 26 million was the number that I proposed to you last time. Because remember when the governor said to lock in at state aid, and they said if I don't get all the concessions that I'm asking for, we will lock in at the state aid rate for 14-15. This was my argument. This was the actual aid that I believe that we were going to receive, and that's why I asked the board to consider that as the lock-in number until we heard further from the governor's office. Okay, so up to this point, that's the density of sort of the numbers right there.
Last point before we do.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to make this clear for the audience as well. So people have been that the district has received a $2.5 million increase in state aid. When we go through all these various calculations, what we're saying is the actual difference from our proposed budget of last year is only a $634,000 increase in state aid.
That is correct.
From what we budgeted from year to year.
If we budget all of the state aid that we believe that we were going to get, that actual anticipated.
So we've gone from a $2.5 million increase in our budget to the reality of a $634,000 increase in our budget.
That is correct.
From state aid.
And you haven't gotten to
and we haven't got to other things that may impact even that number.
That is correct.
So to make sure we're on the same page. All right.
And again, Amanda, we vote on a proposed spending formula for next year.
A budget is an
estimate. A budget.
Yeah, no matter what the state sends us, right?
It's right. We go to the taxpayers with a maximum dollar amount to be spent, which is to be our best estimate.
with any increase, I mean, we still have a GEA in place also.
Right.
So
Well, sure. There's 1.7 million still being withheld by GEA. If you read in the newspaper that the legislature gave back 60% of the GEA, well, that may be true in a gross number, but for your school district, it's 39%. So there were winners and there were losers, and welcome to one of the losers.
They also spoke about that restoration of foundation aid. Ithaca received a 0.37% increase in foundation aid.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rounding error. It wasn't enough money to hire another teacher.
About $60,000, yeah.
So state aid is about at what, 2009, 2010 level?
289.
I've struggled with the increase to state aid every year. I've heard it. But we're not back.
Poor language. I appreciate that. Yeah. It should be almost a restoration. You're not even that. We're not even there yet.
We're not even there yet. There's a million. And, the legislature says they're going to restore it all next year, but, they've been saying that for 2 years, so.
Right. We haven't gotten to the end yet, as well as we said.
And we haven't gotten to the end yet, so.
So, next slide, please. Thanks, Danielle. You all know, we've been sort of following a budget development process. Part of the budget development process, really a key component of that has been all the work that's been going on in the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee meets monthly. We had a special meeting yesterday as well, mainly because the timeliness of this meeting, along with the state aid runs being released, we wanted to make sure that we had some conversation to be able to then try to replicate here in public, to be able to sort of voice where we sort of stood in terms of what our thinking was around what revenue should look like, and then the revenue obviously drives the expenditures, right? And so you have to have a balanced budget. Whatever we decide we want to agree upon as our actualized revenue, that will then be reflected in the spending in terms of the expenditure report. All right, so there was a question was, if we do agree with this increase to state aid, how will ICSD budget the additional funding? And so I want to sort of turn it over and welcome the Finance Committee members and those that were at the meeting as well, sort of have a conversation with me. I tried to capture on a few slides some of the thinking that happened yesterday. So the next slide, Danielle. Before we answer that question, we just want to remind folks and also just highlight a little bit of some additional considerations, right? And so remember this graph, I think, again, a lot of folks are getting really, really used to this. Those of us that are visual learners appreciate something like this versus the dense Excel charts that I often show, and I apologize for those as well. But we try to keep this very simple, and so just for a reminder and a review, remember this red line is the expenditure line, and the blue line is the revenue line. Up until this point here, this is our budget that we're living in right now. All of these other numbers have already been audited, so these are actual numbers. We know that this is actual revenue received and actual expenditures. When there is a gap and the blue line is above the red, that means that we're actually generating fund balance as a district, which is actually a good thing. It's there for rainy days. It's there for when times get tough, which we realized. And we started to utilize that fund balance to fill the gap when the expenditure line actually outpaced the revenue line. And so when the expenditure line is above the revenue line, that's when you have to go into your reserves and your fund balance to be able to make up the difference, because we always have to end the year with balance. So the fund balance was really there for us. It started at about, 22 million at times with reserves.
Totals.
Totals, right? And so again, I talked about this before. If I could do the green box a different way, I probably started as quite a large triangle and kind of starting to work its way down, right? Because if we are not bringing in more revenue than expenditure, we are no longer able to rebuild our fund balance and reserves. Okay? And all we're doing really is expending revenue and fund balance. So it's the same idea. If you're at home, you plan that big vacation, and you don't realize, oh gosh, how am I going to replenish that savings account, right? I have no plan. It's gone. We had a great time. It was fantastic. We really did amazing work here. We kept things steady. We were able to keep people, keep their jobs. It was a necessity to use fund balance during those times of struggle. And so we realize, though, now that we're really trying to put those two lines back together again, and have them cross the other way, because we're at a point now with our reserves and fund balance that we want to manage them for growth purposes. Okay? And so the reason why I've added an additional line here, this is the budgeted amount of 113,774,956. That's this year right now. We actually know for sure, because of good management, because of good budgeting, and because of all the hard work that everybody's been doing in the district, we know for sure that the $2 million of fund balance that we use to balance the budget, we will be able to carry forward for next year. Okay? And so already we know that we will not spend $2 million of the fund balance that was allocated to balance the budget that we're currently in. The next slide, please, Danielle.
Before we go back, we should
Sure.
also make mention, spending of the fund balance in those years was directly, if I'm not mistaken, at the governor's, not the governor's suggestion, but telling districts as well, demand to spend your fund balance. In other words, districts across the state, many districts emptied their fund balances, trying to find ways to balance their budgets because of the GEA and other things that were taking place.
That is correct. That's correct. And I think we will hope for a turnaround, right? Sooner than we've seen.
Well, I would push back a little bit. I'm not sure that we've ever really done what the governor is.
That's right. That's why I wanted to change it as well.
I think it was more to the point, trying to maintain programming, staff to do what we do in Ithaca, and that somebody would come to their senses in Albany and stop the GEA, so we could reverse that graph a bit. We do need to have, the blue line needs to be above the red line. We can't sustain where we are right now, and that's, we have to be able to cross those two lines again. Otherwise, we're basically not doing our job as fiscal oversight of the district. Correct, Pat? But go ahead.
Correct. Correct, Rob. I just wanted to point out with regard to the blue and red lines that if you looked at the 113 million budget that was passed last year, and then you look at the $111 million budget that is going to come in this year, this does not mean $2 million extra dollars to spend, because if you look at the blue line, we still are short over $1 million in revenue. It just means we don't have to empty the fund balance. So it's not like we have that money to pay. Just want to point that out.
Yeah, it's not.
And again, we don't know how we're going to end this year. This is the year that we're living in. We hope, obviously, that we're going to, again, continue to correct that, again, through the good work that we've been doing. So once we get these audited numbers in the summertime, in the early fall, that will then go on the slide as well, and then we'll start to use this as a sort of a data point. So I was very cautious about how I wanted to think about phrasing this. So I wanted to just put this out as also other considerations, right? And so for me, when I think about considerations, it's sort of the being comfortable with the unknown, but we better be aware that it's a possibility, right? Because if I don't mention it and then things happen, then I feel like I'm not doing my job as the school business official to be able to say this is potential. This is potential for impact for us. All right, so I wanted to just mention, remember when a lot of the reasons why the governor's budget was withheld and we didn't get our aid was there was a lot of sort of parameters around his sort of funding, and he said, you have to meet these certain requirements or else I'm not going to release these numbers and we're going to lock in at state aid. One of them was around APPR. And APPR obviously is our performance review process for our teachers. And we know for sure that we must submit a newly revised APPR plan by a certain deadline, November 15th, I believe. And that has to be, obviously we agree upon that with the ITA and we work together to develop that. And that deadline must be followed. It is directly tied to receiving any increases in state aid from 14-15 to 15-16.
And it's to follow a plan that hasn't been created yet.
There's, I don't know, have they released guidance documents, Adam, yet?
No, it's
been kicked over to state ad.
It's been kicked to state ad, and they've been given till June 30th.
There we are.
So we're on a deadline, but we can't even start the work because you don't know what you're trying to do yet.
Right.
And that's why it's an unknown. It's a big unknown.
Right.
And the threat is, if we don't meet the deadline, the aid increase goes to zero. Just so everybody understands why it's an issue here. If we don't meet it, in theory, your aid increase is taken away from you.
But
$600,000 that.
Well, the governor would argue it's $2.5 million, but that's different. In other words, Jay, we don't know exactly what the dollar sum would be.
Whatever it is, it goes.
It goes, correct.
One other thing that I want to mention, and I know Dr. Brown mentioned that during his superintendent's talk, is we don't know also yet in terms of, and Matt mentioned that as well, the implications of below a 95% participation rate tied to state aid. I know that there's a lot of conversation on both sides. Some say that was, again, a scare tactic that was already mentioned in the meeting. Again, I put this on this consideration slide because I feel like we should just be aware that there is potential implications, but we don't know what that is yet. There are memos out, and Brad,
I was going to say, while it's a
that.
threat, we all received copies of a deputy commissioner of education telling one particular school district, if you go forward as you've proposed, they were actually proposing to withdraw from the test entirely. A, the superintendent loses their certification and their job. The board will all be removed. We'll take away your Title I funding.
Down to the penny.
Down to the penny. And the guy had calculated it down to the penny. So, and, you know, have a nice day at the end of that. That was the letter. So while I understand it's a threat, it's from a deputy commissioner. I think I've got to believe it's a real threat. Now, I understand, you know, many school districts in the state are going to be below 95% this year. So I have no idea what the response is going to be, or if they're going to draw a different line. You know, if it's below 50%, you're a bad boy, or if you're below 65 or whatever. I don't know where they're going to put it. Right now, it says 95. And for the moment, you have to assume that's the case.
And slightly related, if federal law comes down through regarding, we're still doing No Child Left Behind, correct? I mean, there's still some remnants of that. We basically have a pretty good idea where we are. We're less than 95%. I mean, that's folks have chosen to do that. How does that impact where we will be a district that is designated as what?
Oh, all districts
will. Would not be meeting AYP in participation rate.
Yep.
So, a lot of plans next year.
I mean, virtually every district, it sounds like.
Except New York City, probably.
Except New York City will be AYP, will not make AYP this year.
So we've
virtually every district.
Annual yearly progress.
Adequate yearly progress.
Adequate.
So we've seen in the past we have various schools and under the old program that they had to come up with a plan. I mean, I could list them.
So the assumption is everybody's going to have to do it for every building.
The whole district, but
district-wide plans, school-based plans, yeah.
Okay. So
additional expenses, to be real.
Additional expenses,
resources, faculty
time and effort, principal's time, director's time,
teacher time,
individual teachers. I mean, it'll eat up a ton.
Unfunded mandate.
I mean, yeah. I mean, to say that the opt-out has no impact is foolish.
Well, I'm getting, again, I'm not going to try to predict what Albany would do, what state aid would do, but it's federal law states that if we do not meet AYP, then
we have to do these plans.
Then we have to do the plans. That still is intact. There's movements to change, obviously, the federal law, but then we're a long way away from that.
And you have to redirect your Title I money. Am I correct with that, Lydia? A certain percentage of your Title I monies need to be redirected based on what the federal government wishes for you to spend it on.
Right.
So we have a plan in place now for how we get to use those monies. If not making AYP, we must use those monies for other purposes.
They're otherwise encumbered.
Otherwise encumbered.
It'll mean shifting staff to different places. It'll be.
But the testing has already started. We're pretty much now we're at 85%, right? I mean, it's no big secret, right? I mean, I'm just trying to get a handle on what is going to be expected from this budget, and then we add in APP, the new APPR, but that was approved as part of the budget that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor.
Right.
There will be a different APPR plan, and part of that APPR plan is outside observations by who?
An independent evaluator?
To be named at a later date.
That has not been established.
But they have to be outside the district, so it's not just.
Well, we haven't said what their qualifications are yet. We haven't done.
I'm assuming.
We haven't said any of that yet.
I'm assuming we have to pay for them.
Oh, yeah.
That's correct.
A per diem, per hour?
Well, I mean, that's again in the details, but we have 560, 570 teachers. The new mandate would require each of those teachers have one of their observations done by someone from the outside. So just if you start doing the math, a few hours for each of those, and it adds up fast. I know the state has suggested already, like, that there would be districts will be swapping administrators for days to do this, but the logistics of that seems very challenging, to say the least.
And it says
And
you're
rotten
going
compared to an Ithaca.
well, and it says you're going to take your administrator out of the building.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, here we've decided that we have administrators who we think are appropriate in particular buildings, but you know what? It's okay. They should go away for 2 weeks and evaluate in another school district. That's problematic.
Did you come up with dollars on that, Matt?
I mean, there's kind of different theories, but we're thinking that 200,000 is probably somewhere in the ballpark. Maybe a little bit more than that.
If you're paying like a per diem or hourly rate.
So,
Why don't we skip forward to the...
Sure, Danielle. So again, I will repeat the question now with just those few considerations. The next few slides, actually slides that I just tried to capture some of the notes, just in bullet pointed information. So Danielle, you can go to the next slide. So this is again based on the Finance Committee yesterday, and so this is just to sort of capture points. I think the Finance Committee and Brad,
Well, here,
if you'd like to.
this is where we came out. There were 5 of the 8 of us at the committee meeting, so we had a good discussion at that point. Where we came out was we would use as a budget number 27,108. The number that we used is a budget number this year, even though we only received 26,3 something. So it's a $700,000 or $800,000 increase over last year.
We'll hit the number someday.
If we
some year, it'll be the right number, right?
Right.
Okay, all right.
So then what do we want to do, with that increase? I mean, the first thing we discussed was to put the real property tax levy back down to 2.99, get it back below 3%. Well, the tax cap allows us to go to 3.13. The committee wanted it down to at least begin with a 2, so we put it down to the 2.99. I know it's playing with the number, but it's also dollars, so we put it there.
On sale for today only.
And as Amanda notes on the slide, we'll complete all the property tax freeze requirements, and ICSD taxpayers will get a reimbursement check if we pass this.
Right, it's if your property is reassessed, you won't get credit for that, but it's actually what your assessed value is currently. Any increases in school tax that you would receive, we will be below the cap, and therefore we will do all the paperwork and show that we have all of these efficiencies. It's quite an endeavor, and then that way taxpayers would get the difference, the increase in their taxes back as a rebate check to them.
And let me just to convert the 2.99 to what it means to your tax rate itself. I think you actually have a slide further back, but it's a 9-cent increase per thousand. So if you've got a star exemption, you got a $100,000 assessment. We're talking about a $9 increase. Just to give you a feel for where that sits, and for those with $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 houses, you can multiply.
Say it again. So Brad, tell me. So I see the tax levy increase, which is the amount of money that the district
collects, because the total number, the total value of property is increased. We've all seen the cranes and things in town. We know that that there are new properties, so we know the total assessed value is growing faster, and so our tax rate will only go up about 0.6%.
That's the number I was looking for.
Yeah, about 0.6%.
So it's like 0.5 something, whatever.
Yep. So you won't. Now, and that assumes, as Amanda pointed out, that assumes your assessments stay the same. And we were aware last year that there was one neighborhood where there was quite a bit of increase, while others stayed the same. We don't control the assessments.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Go ahead, Pat.
yeah, so my question is relevant to that last slide. Thank you for clarifying how much the increase will be. I'm sure it'll cost the state of New York pretty much what it will be sending us back in, increments of $9, $18, and $27. If we go to the 3.13 increase that was formerly proposed and we don't budget higher state aid, do we not get the property tax freeze?
No, we would. We would.
Okay, so we'd still get it.
We'd still get it.
Right.
Right.
So
But this is still.
So that's to that point. This is an offer from
Yeah,
the
this is the
finance
Finance Committee's recommendation.
and it does not mean that there's not up for discussion at this point. It's not written. This is
That's
just
correct.
And I would ask again: are we clear on the 3.13? That is indeed our tax levy limit. That did not change once Albany did their budget, and once you saw your state aid runs, et cetera. Those items that you need to do your calculation. That did not change.
The building aid is what is utilized, and that did not, there was no change for our rates in that. And so, Pat, just so you know, it's a difference from 1.13%, which is the cap, which would, again, just be a majority vote, simple majority, and also that we would be eligible for the property tax freeze. To decrease it to 2.99, we're talking about $106,000 in difference. So to go from 3.13%
Reducing the tax levy by $106,000
to 2.99%, it's a decrease in the revenue of $106,000.
But if we went to the higher tax levy and there was a slightly higher tax rate, then New York State would give every property taxpayer an infinitesimally larger amount of money in their little teeny checks.
$11 versus $9 if you have a $100,000 house.
Thank you, New York State.
That is correct.
And it cost the state a little over $2 million to process those checks last year.
But that's an interesting point, Pat.
Why is that?
Because if we raise it higher, they're going to get more of the money back.
Just like
it's like needs-based financial aid.
Yeah, but they still have to.
Yeah, but it's compounding, so you might get it back this year, but I don't get it back the following years when you
there's no
continue to
promise
increase
this
my tax
program's
rate.
going to continue.
Right. So, and as people know, I'm advocating for the lowest possible.
I'm not necessarily advocating for a higher tax rate, but I'm very wary of all these unfunded things, and I do not believe that any threat that Andrew Cuomo makes against schools, financial or otherwise, is an idle threat.
To Pat's point, Albany, the governor has been very willing to claw back $22 million from this district over the last few years. We're still down 1.7 this year. So just, I don't trust Albany any farther than I can throw Andrew Cuomo, which the way I feel about him.
Cornell days, maybe.
Yeah,
But I
exactly.
agree with Sean's point about it does compound.
Yes.
To the extent that you go to the higher number and then next year it has a compounding effect.
But if I may ask another question.
Of course.
Is there a possibility that we as a district and every other district in the state could be penalized to the point where our financial aid actually decreases from what they gave us last year?
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, if they took away the title money, it certainly would.
The title
That's not state. Our total revenue would be down.
Unknown.
Yeah, it's an unknown.
That's why I said I would feel remiss if I didn't put it as a consideration. And again, we don't have enough information to say this is definite, but I do think it's a consideration to play out and think about.
I agree with you, and I think it's something that every voter and every person in this district should know. It is a real possibility.
Right.
Right, and whether they would be draconian this year or wait till next year, depending on how much the movement continues, what will they have to do to regain control over the state of New York? It's state ed, it's the governor, it's the Board of Regents, it's Merrill Tisch.
Well, how do they bring back
she's not
credibility?
happy. She's not happy.
Well, I'm reminded
what
of
do they
one
do?
proposal in that last budget when even though a small percentage of school districts, this one included, voted to override the cap. Andrew Cuomo proposed a measure in this year's budget that would say if a district overrides the tax cap, the entire district loses their star exemption.
Yeah.
Is that in there? No. But still, that tells you about a mindset, and it's a dangerous mindset, and we have to deal with it.
Well, it's New York politics. I mean, it's gotta be tough.
I'll try to be tougher this year, Rob.
Why don't you slip to the next slide? We'll keep. So to finish off, this slide and the next slide, we'll finish off where the Finance Committee ended up. So what we would include in the budget, in addition to what we had previously, we have to fund the independent evaluator to meet the APPR requirements. We have to fund that, the unfunded mandate. We're suggesting an increase in professional development and an increase in the number of teachers in reserve. This last year, I believe we had 1 in the budget. We want to leave some space.
Barely that.
Barely that. Yeah, we might have funded it for half a year or something, but it was pretty thin. So our suggestion is to add those items back in. I'll allow management to make the decision on allocate between professional development and teachers in reserve, and that'll be driven partially by their ultimate calculation on the APPR requirements. And if you want to flip to the next, well, let me finish where we are with the recommendation and then come back, okay? So if you can just see the next slide. Oh, gee, you can't read that bottom number. All right.
I'll read it for you. So the first column there is the budgeted revenue as of today. And so when we went to the voters last year, we went with $113,774,956. And then the proposed revenue that we are, so with the changes, so if as you see, we keep state aid flat, other revenue has always been flat. The real property tax, I noted there what the actual cap is, Pat, so that we know. However, we said that we would adjust that down a bit to the 2.99% increase versus the 3.13% increase, and so that is shown there in that column. We're still carrying forward the $2 million in designated fund balance, the $120,000 in appropriate capital reserve that was from a few projects a while ago that we're wrapping up now, and so that was actually. And no other reserves will go toward balancing the budget. And that moves us forward. Last time I came to you with about 114.3, I believe.
Right.
This is 115,014,480. So I apologize. I did this on Google and then translation into PowerPoint. Some of the colors didn't go with it. So we will correct that in the Dropbox.
And year-over-year change in the budget at 1.09.
That is a 1.09, so we're lingering right around in what used to be a 2% world. We are down to a 1.1 barely world.
We like the world to grow faster than that, actually.
Right.
But,
and just remember, expenditures is still going up in the probably more than a 2% world. Revenue, this is revenue.
Oh, definitely.
Revenue is not growing
Exactly.
at the rate that expenditure is.
Just a quick point on professional development as well.
I think you flip back to the previous slide.
At the Facilities Committee, we had a little bit of a extended conversation with the acknowledgement that over the past couple of years, we've been doing a number of things over the past couple of years, and one of the places that have taken the biggest hit has been professional development. And so how can we, particularly with a number of initiatives taking place in the district, how can we best support the work of teachers? For me, I'm more interested in this, and I was talking to Lavelle earlier today, also in response to the one-to-one initiative as well, to make sure that we have enough out there for folks to be as comfortable as possible as we roll out this endeavor. And so the idea being that one of the ways in which we can think about investing in our teachers, in particular without being locked into a salary from year to year in case we have a devastating impact like another budget, would be to find ways to increase our lines of personal development, provide more opportunities for our folks. So I just want to make sure we got that part as well, that we acknowledge that what's been taking place, and we're trying to make sure that we can
absolutely
to address that concern that's been addressed, and especially given what Dr. Landau was talking about earlier today in terms of how that work has been moving some of our special ed work forward as well, feeling that we needed to make sure we kept that train moving forward.
Certainly heard that from Lee earlier and Connor.
Can somebody explain what teachers in reserve are?
Unassigned. A position held
Money
out.
is money held.
There's money held, but
For the funding of
they're not assigned to a class. There's no classroom. It's to allow for growth It's allowed for need.
We suddenly get more kindergarten students signing up for a particular school that we weren't predicting.
Or you have a special education need in a building that requires an additional teacher to be assigned. It's for that, and we need some flexibility because you're budgeted down to every single, right down to the classroom, and we need some flexibility. I think Eldred had his hand up.
Eldred, go ahead.
Any idea, any approximation of the value of that slide?
About 600,000.
600,000.
600,000.
That's including what you just said about one-to-one?
No, I exclude what I said about professional development.
So the whole,
It's a one-to-one.
those things, it's 600,000 on that slide.
In addition to what we are already spending for professional development.
Yeah, in addition, we've got other investments there.
When we get it.
Well, and that's the other thing, when we get it. Yeah.
And these things that we're proposing are things that we can make some decisions on October, November, as monies come to us, hopefully.
Or even after the legislature completes their session in June, there may be some clarity on some issues. We don't know.
Right, Elder, then when, it's recommendations for that dollar amount, Brad, that we saw, the additional, after the state aid runs, after you did all your calculations, these recommendations are for that difference, that delta of 684,000 or so.
Flip forward a slide.
Right.
Thanks.
Right.
You can see, oh, that's right, it's budget to budget. It's on the slide with what we had, our actual for this year is about 26,350.
That's right.
In state aid, assuming 27,108.
And then adjusting down
and then we're
by
taking
about
100,000.
100,000.
And then taking a little over 100,000 for
Right.
the tax, so it's a little more than 600,000 on that, those items.
And anything, Judy Max, questions?
No, just, yeah.
And we talked about, again yesterday, well, you were there, Judy
Yeah.
Max at Finance, and Matt, you spoken to it, have spoken to it. Language, I guess, is tough for me. But for this year, there's a long list of things that we wish we could do, want to do, but really not feeling that we could commit to a sustainable addition to programming. When we still don't quite know what Albany's going to do, but we're also, as I pointed out yesterday, we're still, our expenditure line is still higher than our revenue line. So it's really hard to add more classrooms really at any level. And I'll say, okay, pre-K, it's really hard to commit to more pre-K classrooms when we don't know whether we can sustain it.
We don't want to fund it for 1 year and have to let it go again, and that's what we had to do
hire
before.
people
or 4 months.
10 months
or
Right.
4 months till November.
And all of the, what was on the previous slide, all of those things give us a certain amount of flexibility. So it's not a...
Yeah, we're not trying to tie those down. And I'll just, there were people here tonight to address Project 4. I don't think we should leave that unaddressed. We have not added that back in here. I know there's a meeting on Project 4 tomorrow. There's flexibility here, but as I understand it, this did not come forward from the principals to be in the budget this year, and so we didn't put it in the budget this year. So that's unfortunately where that ended up. My kids all did it. I understand it, but if that's not the program that the principals are supporting right now, and we have a pretty robust arts program, otherwise, I think that's where it stands. But as I say, I know there's a meeting to discuss that in particular tomorrow. I didn't want it to go without addressing it at all.
Yeah, maybe I can add a little bit to that. Not that principals don't support the program. I think we reversed support, right? It was protected last year.
Right.
But there were some tough decisions to be made this year. Expenditures aren't meeting or outperforming revenues. So we're looking at, do we take a classroom teacher out and raise class size? Do we take a teacher out that's teaching strings at the elementary level and support Project 4? Tough decisions all the way around. So I wouldn't say so much as not just principal supporting the program. It's just when looking at all the things, this was one area that we think there's an opportunity for us to reimagine it, think about what we could do differently, different funding sources, other things. But this is one of many community partnerships, collaborations that we've had to move away from over the last 3 or 4 years, many of which have had a significant impact for young people.
Well, and we've had David Brown present about the exponential growth of the music program at the elementary level, especially at some of our schools, BJM is one, and so that's something that we have to account for too. And that's a great thing. That's, you know, it's
And
great.
so swapping out a strings instructor was not an exciting option.
Well, we thought,
not when we've been really recruiting,
growing,
you know,
right,
having
when we've
a
been
lot
growing
more
the
kids
program.
going, yeah.
the Fine Arts Persons Group, we fought for years to get elementary strings and band into the budget, and it took years to get it in. Once you take it out, it's really hard to put it back. Susan, did you?
As a principal who had to put forth Project 4 as one of our suggestions was, again, thank you so much, Dr. Brown, for saying it wasn't about not supporting. I've watched those kids do amazing things. But we also felt that the community that surrounds us might be creative enough and have enough affluence in some corners and tap other, as you said, funding sources that are also already quite institutionalized in this town to help support some variation on that kind of programming, even if it couldn't be as robust as it currently is, that it might still provide our kids with something like that experience, because it is valued, but we did have to make hard choices.
Understand.
Jay, go ahead.
To the point of funding that program and others, could you go back to the slide that I just wanted to cut to the chart, the
last slide.
The numbers.
Go forward.
yeah, that one.
There you are.
So I just wanted, for my own benefit and maybe anyone watching, revenue is up 2% and spending is up 1%.
No, revenue is up 1.09 total.
Well, just rounding off. Revenue's up 1, okay. Revenue's up 1 and spending's up 2. So someone would have to ask, how do you do that? And that's done by the 2 million designated fund balance, the 1 million retirement fund reserve, and 220,000 reserve from employee benefits and 50,000 reserve.
That's how we did it last year.
So I'm just reviewing this, that that even again this year, we're spending more than,
No. We're proposing a $115 million even budget. It's just that 2 million of it, Jay, is coming from fund balance.
Right. That's my point. That we're using fund balance to balance our budget.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so about, could we fund any other additional thing?
And I get that question every day. Multiple sources.
Jay, the answer is yes, but it comes at the expense of something else. And we've tried to play that game, but that's the reality, right?
Yeah. Right. There is no, we're tapped out.
Right.
We're at the point of having to do trade-offs, one thing for another, because there are not. This is our last year of going to these reserves.
Well, and to be fair and honest, we've traded off other community partnerships, you know,
over the last couple of years. Absolutely.
I mean, you know, that, you know, you can, not to go dollar for dollar, but less dollars, and you know, everyone does great work, and we really have a great community here that comes together, and you know, in support of our children. So this is not easy, and especially when you have, you know, teachers' aides coming up talking about how much they make, and we have needs for PD. So this is not easy. But when you look at community partnerships, it's hard to turn away anybody. So
It's a way to lever our resources.
Yes.
You'd already done the tax calculation. I didn't know you had it on the last slide.
I tried.
Way ahead of me.
to
Way ahead of me. So I'm sorry, and I'm glad you had it, because it's $9 without the star rebate, without your star.
So Pat can't get her 11.
No, she's not going to let him go. Sorry.
Pat just wants a prime number.
So you keep the $2.70 for the star piece.
What's that?
There ain't no question about.
No, well, Judy Max is going to speak, but then I'll tell you how happy I am to see the budget end in zero. But go ahead. Go ahead, Judy Max.
I would like at this point to adopt the budget of $115,014,480.
That wasn't, well, are you Seth Peacock, or is it?
She's moving item C in the agenda, and I'm seconding it.
Thank you.
Second by Brad, and obviously we can still discuss, and it's nice to have Seth Peacock back in the room, just for a short period of time, because we would have been there a while ago, so we appreciate you channeling Seth. Seth, if you're obviously not listening, because you're doing other things. Yeah, Seth used to move the budget like in November. I mean, but we obviously there's still room for questions and discussion. Go ahead.
Right, so we've been discussing all along as well, so it sort of feels like, not to add to this conversation, but again, I'm one who keeps wanting to have our tax rate, let me rephrase that, we all want our tax rate to be as low as possible, let me not say it that way. And I know last year was extremely difficult given the significant increase that we were proposing, but also given the significant funding cliff that we found ourselves, particularly given the loss of federal and state money in that regard. So while this one still doesn't seem, I know that what I've appreciated in my 6 years on the board is that this is not a conversation that we began this evening. And so if there's seemingly I don't want to say a lack of debate, but if there's seemingly like it seems that's the question. This has been a 12 year. It
seems like 12 years.
That's right. 12 years. It's a really bad joke, but 12 years of slaves in my head. So a 12-month process, but I recall us having this conversation in September, this past September, of talking about what we're going to be doing, planning going forward. So conversations have been had in committee meetings, have been had at board meetings, have been had at special meetings as well. So this is not sort of, we're coming to this evening. This is months and months of, and it will be, once this budget is adopted, we'll then start.
And then looking at what the next one might look
So all I have to say is that while I would always want a lower tax levy, 285, 275, whatever, 299 makes sense, and to reiterate to people, as we've been saying, that our tax levy is not with the rate change that you're going to see on your actual tax bill, right? That the tax rate increase for homeowners is going to be under 1%, which is still an increase, but significantly low, relatively speaking, for some of our neighbors as well.
Speaking for my neighbors that got hit with the double whammy last year.
I did too.
No, I know.
It still hurts.
I know.
Look, my assessment went up $75,000 and an increase, so I'm aware of what that money was like.
Go ahead, Brad.
All right, I'm just going to summarize. We're talking about adopting a budget, asking the voters to adopt a budget of $115,014,480. That represents a 1.09% increase over the last year's budget. A pretty modest increase. Because state aid is not increasing, the tax levy on the local taxpayer needs to go up 2.99% in order to get us to 1.09. Fortunately, we live in an area that has growth in properties, and therefore it only calculates for your tax to 1/2% increase. I know that's a lot of different numbers and variables, but that's how it lays out. But it's a 1.09% increased budget, pretty modest increase.
We will still have the lowest dollar tax rate in the county, correct?
By a lot.
I mean, is it 18?
It'll be, what,
It'll be
18.
just over $18.
18 or 18.19 with this.
18.
It was over 18 last year.
And it'll be 18.18. I mean, some of our neighbors have rates that are $23 a thousand.
And Brad knows I always like to say this, but I know we're different, but it's also, I think the assessments are also higher.
Yes.
So while we have the lowest tax rate, we also have higher assessed values, but
They reflect value and they reflect a choice.
I choose to live in your neighbor community, Brad.
That's what I mean. They reflect a value, they reflect value, and they reflect a choice.
Not all of us live in fancy homes, so we're good. Connor, and then Pat.
last meeting it was, we saw that the budget had no layoffs in it. Is that still the?
Good question.
Are staff cuts taken into consideration, or are there staff cuts?
4.5 by attrition?
Probably about 10 total.
4.5 on the
4.5
teaching side.
teacher FTE, about 4 para and 1 admin. But we are hoping to achieve many of those through attrition or, an IEP changing and a para not being required, those kind of things. So we're still in the process of.
There were 2 teacher retirements in tonight's personnel report.
We won't, what we won't see from that is an increase in class size or a reduction in class offerings. So we feel very good about that.
So the number 10 will decrease by June?
No, by September 1.
Other questions?
No, I just want to
that's right,
speak
Pat,
to
sorry, go ahead.
the increase and keeping it under the maximum to avoid this compounding. I'm going to state the obvious. The property taxes in New York are really high. It is becoming increasingly burdensome. I have about 4 neighbors who are all moving down south this year in retirement because they don't feel that they could create it. It is something Albany created a long time ago. But a lot of people have spoken to me about feeling the pain of last year's tax increase. Like Sean, I would like to keep the tax increase lower. I don't believe that we will see a scenario in the foreseeable future when we can really override a tax increase, a tax cap with Andrew Cuomo there, and maybe we really shouldn't, because people are having a hard time paying taxes, and assessments, as you've noticed, are going to skyrocket.
Yeah.
One of my neighbors is selling his home, and I'm just watching the mail, because it could be my turn next, and that's, as you say, I mean, it reflects a choice. Although when we bought our house, it was unfashionable and cheap.
Well, what I will say is I've lived here long enough. I've lived here long enough to remember when there was a time when assessments were going up faster than the rate of the budget, such that your tax rate was actually going down.
Yes.
Similar to what's happened with the city of Ithaca this year.
And I remember housing slums where tons of people had to sell their homes, and that's one of the ways we got ours. These all go in cycles. I am extremely nervous about what Albany may do to districts this year with APPR unfunded mandates and the opt-out, even though the Ithaca City School District has in no way, shape, or form encouraged opt-out or moved to adopt a resolution. So we could be held responsible for actions of people in our community that we cannot control.
Sure.
And so
But
this budget is still very risky for us as a community, because Albany could blow another huge hole in it.
Yep.
But we have nothing else to go on. So I support it as proposed.
But as we do discuss this and talk about this, and what the various scenarios, what has been consistent over time is that Albany has shifted the cost of public education on the local taxpayer, and so we are, as I've said before, we're fortunate to have the support of the community, have a viable tax base in Ithaca, 10 square miles, surrounded by others who do not. We do not rely on 90% of our funding from the state, so we have control. Whatever Albany would do. We still need to control how we spend, what we do, programming that we provide, the people that we hire, assuming we can continue to hire excellent people like Dr. Brown, his team, have them do what they do, and with one less administrator by the time you reorganize again, recognizing how best to spend the dollars in this building, and that really just needs to be at every building. we need to control what we can control, obviously. And there's going to have to be discussions going forward about our cost structure for, a variety of items, one of which obviously is that looming. It's not just us, we saw it with, the pension costs, certainly, but that has come back a bit, but healthcare costs, it's going to be...
Still running up 7% a year.
7% a year in a budget that's going up, how much? 1. So, what is sustainable? And so we talked about sustainability of programming, sustainability of cost structure and how we spend the local dollar. These are local dollars that we're spending now. For the most part, they are local dollars.
Rob, to that point, speaking of sustainability, so I don't want the public to think that we're also not trying to be innovative in how we're trying to approach these issues. Right. And so the energy performance contract that the district is also looking to do is a way in which we found that we think will sort of generate revenue, that it's going to cost us some money, but in the first year of savings, I think the charts that we saw said about $140,000 of revenue generated back to the district. And so the idea being we're still trying to explore many ways to think about how we generate revenue, even given all of these things that, that Rob's saying as well, right? But there's an example of our sustainability, hopefully trying to be forward-thinking. Doesn't mean we don't have significant challenges to face ahead. But I wanted to make mention of the ways in which the board has also been trying to be proactive in this work as well.
And I just wanted to mention that with the budget priorities and where we're adding back, I really strongly support professional development for teachers and paraprofessionals. I think that the comments were extremely strong in the special ed presentation. This is something I was hearing, I think we all were hearing from last year, that please try to restore professional development. It's a quality profession. It's helping teachers do their job better. Teachers deserve good professional development. I'm glad to see it in the budget. I hope we can do as much as we can, and I hope that it's helpful to our teachers who we appreciate every day for the incredibly complex and valuable work they do. We've seen a lot of dedicated teachers to the special education issue and differentiated instruction and all the things we're trying to bring to students, and they need this guidance, and we need to give it to them.
Other comments, questions? Eldred, anything back there? You good? Dr. Brown, anything?
No. Nothing else.
We don't have to adopt tonight. What's the last date that we can adopt?
Oh, let's wait, yeah.
It'd be nice.
It's been moved. It's been moved.
You could, the governor could stay the execution. It could happen. Right? It could happen. So it's been moved, seconded. I'm looking for any other questions, comments. Everyone's has had their fill. All right. And we are an 8-member board, but all in favor? That is Eldred, that is everyone. So thank you, board. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Angela, who's not here, for all the work. Well, right. I mean, we work on. Angela is working numbers for us all summer long, and we'll start again. Thank you for your team and the business office, Amanda.
I move Resolution D to adopt the property tax credit card as presented in the agenda.
I second. And I appreciate that it was already filled out.
And so it's all, it is there, nothing else? Are you good, good, Jay? Anything?
Yeah, good.
Okay, all in favor? That's everyone?
You want to move it?
Then,
can we see it?
Yeah, it's in there. It's in the Dropbox. I'll move the 2015-16 academic calendar as presented. Yeah, it's in the Dropbox.
I'll second.
I got
It was in the
email.
Dropbox. So.
It calls for school in session Friday.
Say it again, Judy. I'm sorry.
It calls for school to be in session on Friday. I got several. Good Friday.
Oh, there it is. Sorry.
Yeah. And I got several emails to that effect.
I can appreciate that. We also ask students to be in school on Ramadan. We also ask students to be in school on the Festival of Eid. We also ask students to be on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Thank you.
And so I'm not trying to be sensitive to these things. I'm understanding all of them as well. But if If it was every single holiday,
I
then we
know,
would
I
not have
just
school.
wish
And so we
we
have to try to
could.
find a balance between how we be respectful of people's faith and also when we have school.
Connor?
And students can always not go to school if the religious observance, that's an excused absence, right?
The concern actually was about teachers, but more specifically teacher aides. This was from teacher aides.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I appreciate that too.
Was Good Friday during vacation? During break this year, right?
I think so.
Yeah. It's not
How many instructional days is this?
183.
And the contract's 182, so it's got one snow day built in?
We just have the May 27th snow day built in. We only had one snow day built in this year.
One.
Yeah.
Oh, so there's
It's a tighter year. Labor Day's later. Regions are tighter.
Earlier.
It's just as compressed this year.
I just wanted to make one comment of feedback I got from last year's calendar, which you probably got too, and this year, Labor Day is extremely late.
Right.
Last year, starting late was a severe hardship for many hundreds of working families in this district because there was no daycare available between Labor Day and the beginning of school, and that was a week where many of those hundreds of working parents are also working in one of our two colleges, and they cannot take a week off during that time. So I just want to mention that it is what it is being Labor Day this year, but please be mindful of that week going forward because that was an extreme hardship for many families.
One way we were mindful of that was originally we were going to have the 2 teacher work days, the Tuesday and Wednesday after Labor Day. We moved 1 to before Labor Day. And thank you, ITA, for going with us on that and working with their members. So one of the work days is before Labor Day. So it's not perfect, but I had the same concern because some of the first days of kids were going to be Friday of that week, and so we pushed that up.
Thank you. Thank you for considering that. Thank you, ITA.
Just one more comment about the calendar while we're talking about it. Just for future, I know this year is really tight and there are a lot of things, BOCES calendar being one of those things. Every year I get feedback from parents and my colleagues about the half-day parent-teacher conference days for elementary, and it really is a real hardship for not only the kids who have to get dismissed at 11, which means they eat lunch at 9:30 in the morning, and then they might not get for some of our students, they won't get another meal until breakfast the next morning. For parents that leaves them only the afternoon, so if their schedules only allow them to have conferences in the morning, that doesn't really work. So for a lot of reasons, you're running buses, for 4 half days instead of 2 full days. So there are a lot of reasons, not just from the teacher standpoint, but from student and especially parent perspectives, that it's really not a great.
So you would go to 1 day, all day conference and a day of class?
Yeah, it's more efficient, it seems, but
This was an area that we've certainly struggled with, and but the one thing we had to factor in. So if we have 183 student days, we take 2 off of elementary for 2 full days for parent. That takes them down to 181. We only have 1 snow makeup day that entire year. We've been seeing winters be more, who knows if it'll continue, but severe in terms of cold and snow. Not this current year, but last year our elementary numbers went below the required amount because of all the weather issues, and so we lost, I think, about $80,000 to $90,000 of state aid. And so in this tight fiscal process, that was one of our concerns, and it's one of those things. So in future years, maybe we'll be able to get back to that. I just wanted to be clear that was one of our considerations.
Okay.
Does state aid come if a child eats lunch? Is that how it's figured out and then can go home?
Essentially. Hour in the day.
Number of hours.
And how many?
It's essentially a half day. So you get through lunch and you'll get 8 hours.
But we'll still get A done if we start 2 hours later, too.
Yes, and the 2-hour delay has helped us immensely.
But we don't make decisions at 5 a.m. based on state aid.
No, we never.
Be clear, I don't want to get sloppy here.
Get them on the bus. Anything else on the calendar? I have a feeling this is not the last time we'll look at the calendar, but we'll be back to it. We'll adopt it for now. Anything, Brett? All in favor? That's everyone on the calendar? Yep, Albert's here. And last item.
Resolution to sustain a student disciplinary determination. Do you want me to read it short?
Yes, please.
Okay. Be it resolved that having duly reviewed the record pertaining to the discipline of a particular student, ID number 700000752, the Board of Education hereby sustains the discipline imposed and authorizes and directs the board clerk to prepare a written notice to the student's parents of the board's determination for the board president's approval and signature.
Second.
Second by Judy Max. All in favor? That's, Judy, Rob, Brad, Eldred, Sean, and Pat. Those opposed? Those abstentions are Chris and Jack. And we had enough, right? Yeah, we had enough to carry. And last items, date of note, April 22nd. Dr. Brown, a teletown hall.
Right.
A Teletubby thing? Is that what are we doing? No, you're going to do something again. We're going to talk to people. Okay. So Teletown Hall at 6 o'clock. We do have a special voting meeting at 7. We do need a quorum for the 7 o'clock to adopt the BOCES administrative budget. Correct, Brad?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we'll be doing.
So make note of that, and then obviously the other items. And with no objection, we are adjourned.